maybe this Friday we might do like a processing space, a healing space of some kind. I don't know where that'll land, but it'll be sometime soon, along with just some kind of more practical, know your rights type things. Why is that relevant? Like right now, we've gotten made aware that in different cities in the country, federal law enforcement with local law enforcement are approaching individuals under the guise of this issue, as well as people who have made like statements. And these people just don't know what their rights are as protesters, what their rights are as just general residents of America. That you can say, I don't want to speak to you, my attorney will respond to you, or I'll speak to you with an attorney, or these kinds of things. And then educational programs as well. If you all have suggestions on people to come and speak in capacities, or just let me know directly, and try to show up for people. Um, and before we get started here, just a few other quick things. Don't let yourself be tokenized. It's really easy to think that you're participating in something that is meaningful, but in reality, you're just a checkbox to be able to say, oh, well, we talked to this Muslim guy and he showed up at this interfaith event, this prayer service, this panel. We don't want to be the reason as to why individuals' rights are bartered. This is relevant to our community because it's a like humanitarian issue, but a false narrative that quite often gets imposed that this is a Muslim-Jewish issue, which is not. And if you don't know the history or the narrative, it doesn't mean just because you have a friend who's something or somebody else told you something, that's not sufficient. Like, you have to know what you're talking about before you talk, because at the other end, consequently, it translates into, one, impact on people's lives, and two, when you stand in front of God, you're going to have to explain, why did I say what I said when I had no idea what I was talking about? Or why did I do what I thought when there's no basis to me actually thinking like this, other than it's coming from my whims? It's not rooted in data or historical narrative or understanding of what's actually transpiring on the ground. Do you know what I mean? If any of you are in a place where individually you need support, someone to talk to, let us know. We can help, but connect with us as best as you can. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna move on, just in the interest of time. Yeah. So we are in the early childhood of the Prophet ﷺ. We talked last week, I think, about his birth and some of the impact that it has, that he was raised by 4 women. His own mother, Amina, who nursed him, was his blood mother, but also he had, through nursing, 3 other women that we know of definitively. Halima Sa'diya, who we talked about the Prophet's relationship with the Banu Sa'ad, how at that time individuals would send their children to live with the Bedouins. We talked about Thuwayba, who was the emancipated servant of the Prophet's uncle, who was so ecstatic at the news of his nephew's birth that he freed this woman and said to go nurse him. And we talked about Ayman Baraka, who at 16 years of age was taken as a servant in the household of the Prophet of God's father, Abdullah, and she's Abyssinian, modern-day Ethiopia. She's a black woman, right? And so what are the implications here? The Prophet is raised by 4 different women who have a bond of motherhood to him. What does it mean that we see with regularity the role not just of women but of black women in the Seerah? Hajar, peace be upon her, playing a pivotal role at the founding of Mecca, Ayman Baraka being a central figure in all of these kinds of things. We talked about the barakah of the Prophet in the home of Halima Sa'diya and how that was apparent, and what that means for us in terms of how do we let the Prophet into our lives, right? How do we not just understand stories, but are in a place where we implement and actualize to the best of our abilities kind of prophetic teachings and counsels, ethics, character, as well as just observance of the Sunnah, outward and inward, as a source of blessing, as a source of barakah, right? And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about that and some specific incidents in the childhood of the Prophet ﷺ, and some other elements that kind of go into this as well. So one of the things that we discussed was that the Prophet, he lost his father before he was born. And we're going to talk briefly about how his mother also dies when he's at a very young age. But if we think about this just from the standpoint as well of family kind of lineage, in the midst of all of this, the Prophet is the only child. He has like brothers and sisters because of the relationship established through nursing, but he doesn't have somebody else that's born to his mother and father, right? Because his father, Abdullah, is also fairly young, and he dies, and Amina is pregnant with the Prophet ﷺ during the instance with Abraha and the year of the elephant that we talked about a few weeks ago. But he's going through all of this as a single child, you know? He's the only child. He is in places where he's losing a lot of his loved ones early on. And you want to think about this from the standpoint of like meaningfulness in Allah's plan. I want you to think about that in the back of your head as we go through some of these things. And when we come back to it, like thinking deeply about why this might be the case as a means of actual preparation and readiness, the loss of loved ones who are primary caregivers in his life, in a place where at a young age he's experienced death a lot, he's moved from place to place, so he also experiences separation from peoples that he's spent time with, and in the midst of all of it, like just people to lean on who are super close to him. Who are those people as he's kind of going through his infancy into his adolescence? The Prophet ﷺ, was not just a source of blessing, but in that time there was many incidences when he was living with Halima Sa'diyah and the Banu Sa'ad that it became indicative clearly that there was something special about him. Halima says to her daughter Shema, who is the milk sister of the Prophet ﷺ, and he also has a milk brother by the name of Abdullah, right? Because Halima nursed him, so her kids, Shema and Abdullah. She tells her daughter Shema that she's got to keep an eye on the Prophet of God. He's like 4 to 6, when he's coming back home, he's like very young, right? 4 to 6 is what's going to be the instance that we talk about. But he's a little kid, so somebody's got to keep a track of him. He's not just running around in the desert aimlessly with no one paying attention to him. So the same way you might have younger people in your life that are older than the youngest people in your life. We leave my daughter at home with my son, and we say, like, keep an eye on him. Or when my wife and I are foster parents, not through nursing, but just to take in kids who are, dealing with difficulty in their homes. Not adoption, but we're giving the child back, right? My daughter, who's 10 now, will say, can you help look after, like, the little kid? Do you know what I mean? So conceptually, this is what is happening, right? Halima Sa'diyah is telling her daughter Shema, like, look after him and protect him from things he doesn't understand. They're living in the Arabian desert. If you've been to Mecca or Medina, or you've been anywhere where it's like that part of the world and it gets super hot, if you've ever gone to the Kaaba, right, and you see at Dhuhr time, like nobody's in the Mataf area, because the sun is blazing as it's striking just the top of your head, your body, it's hitting the like marble kind of floor and the light's reflecting in your face, So she says, make sure he's not stuck out there in that situation. It can be devastating to somebody. They're under the sun for too long, and keep an eye on him. And then Halima Sa'diyah sees the Prophet and is astonished that her daughter Shema is actually sitting next to him in the middle of the day when the sun is blazing. And she's like, what are you doing? I told you to watch this kid, and not only did you not watch him, but you're sitting next to him underneath this. And she said, I'm sitting next to him because as I was watching him, I noticed that no matter where he went, there's always a cloud over his head. Not like a dreary cloud, but a cloud that's protecting him from like the sun. And she said, I'm sitting next to him because it's hot, and the only place I can get shade is if I'm sitting under his cloud. But there's these other things that are coming up for them also at that time. This is something that also consistently happens to the Prophet in adulthood, but it's happening to him as a child as well. This is why you don't want to look at things in isolation, but think about them now in terms of lived experience. Where and how must there be an overt sense of just humility? That if you live a life from the time you're a child, every other child is in a place where they have to run away from the heat of the sun, but the cloud is over your head. Even when the Prophet is an adult, and this is an experience that's there. You're in a place where literally, like the tree weeps when you move away from it, because you're now standing on the mimbar. You've experienced, like, hearing things that other people don't hear. The realities of certain things hidden to people are things that are apparent to you, and the way that all of creation is engaged in a mode of honoring, not dishonoring, how would it not tweak your ego? How do you maintain a certain level of just defined character in the midst of all of this? Do you get what I mean? Like, I don't know what I would do if we were walking down the street and like rain was falling on you only, but not on me. Or if it's super hot and there's something that's providing me with consistent shade, but nobody else gets shade. To recognize that you are different, but to not let that be something that also inflates in a way that's problematic. You start to recognize and understand not just the role of divine intervention in all of it, but fundamentally how it is that the Prophet has been given opportunity to cultivate a sense of self that is bigger than egocentricity. Does that make sense? And there's instances like this that are happening in front of these people, and they have to make sense of it. That you could attribute it to things that are coincidental, but they are noticing that there's something different about this child. There's something else that is going on here. And that sense of presence now, also from the standpoint of his socialization, that as a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, the articulation of it might be different, but he's hearing about this and he's experiencing it as a child, but as an adult, able to also start to kind of fathom and reconcile some of these things in his own worldview and perspective. You see what I mean? One of the things that happens now that's very major, right? We said this, I think, last week, but if not, to reiterate it, most of these kids would go back to their parents after 2 years. Halima Sa'diya goes to the Prophet's mother, Amina, and says that I want to, keep him longer, and making all kinds of justifications. In Mecca at that time, there's also an instance of illness and plague. So Halima Sa'diya wants her son to be protected from that, and so she sends him back with, Amina wants her son to be protected, so she sends him back with Halima Sa'diya to have that ongoing protection. And when they're in this place now, Abdullah, who is the Prophet's stepbrother, his milk brother, he comes frantically at one occasion to his parents saying, my brother from the Quraysh, my brother from the Quraysh. And they go to see what happens to the Prophet ﷺ, and they see him sitting there. And now there's different narrations that describe this instance. There's the incident itself that we hear some words from Halima Sa'diya, who becomes Muslim later on in her life. There's things that are accounted. The way that you would think a child would interact with somebody at this young, tender age, not only is his stepbrother saying something, but he's going to say something. They're just letting all of it out. In some of the narrations, he's also talking to Halima Sadia's husband. Then you have some incidents that are described from when the Prophet is older, that Anas ibn Malik says that the Prophet told him about the things that happened that day. And he goes into detail on demonstrating like what some of it was. But essentially what takes place now when the Prophet is a child, that there are two angels that come. And the hadith says that they lay the Prophet down on the ground. In some of the narrations, it's describing it not as something that's just done with ease, but it's done with struggle. That the angel is being described in some narrations as just coming down from the sky. They're like literally in the way that you could stereotypically conceptualize an angel to be, flying down into the kind of presence of the Prophet. Different from, for example, if you come on Mondays and we go through the hadith of Imam Nawawi, the 40 hadith, we're talking about the hadith Jibra'il. The angel Gabriel walks in the form of a human, and people are like, who is this? We've never seen him. But he doesn't have this angelic form. Right here, they're being described as just coming from like out of the sky. And not only are they coming from out of the sky, but the Prophet is now brought down to the ground and is made to lay on his back in the course of this struggle. And as this is happening now, the angels, they essentially open up the front chest area of the messenger of God, and they take out his heart and they wash this heart. It said there's a golden plate, there is Zamzam water. In some narrations, it's said that the water also has ice in it. And you want to think about this. I don't know how many doctors there are in the room. Are there any doctors in the room? You're lying. All these brown people and there's no doctors. Are you kidding me? Is anybody like a make-believe doctor in the room? Or have doctor parents? Does anybody know anything about medicine? Anybody ever taken Tylenol before? Yeah. Right? When you have heart surgery, what do they do with the heart? When they take it out of the body? Huh? They put it on ice. Right? This is what these angels have with them. They're removing a physical heart, but they're also bringing into it things that have like modern day implications as well. And as they're going through it now, the Prophet is in this place where we're not saying he's just kind of sitting there in a state of ease. He's like impacted by all of this. They open his heart and they remove something that looks essentially like a dark clot and they throw it away. And then they wash this heart with the Zamzam water, this ice water. They also wash out other parts of his inside with it. And this is the first time that this happens. There's another instance in his adulthood that many people are aware of, that this happens a second time. And we'll talk about this when we get to that part of the Seerah, like months from now. But it's during the night journey. It's called the Isra and Miraj. And the Prophet, again, has like his heart cleansed, heart washed. There's a third instance that doesn't often get talked about. It is not necessarily rooted in a similar level of authenticity, but they say when the Prophet is about 10 years of age, like going into that phase, that there's also a third washing, second sequentially, but it's a third that is done. Allah knows best, but at least two we know take place. Why do you think this is happening? That dark clot that's removed, they equate it to something relevant to what inclines people towards doing things that are wrong. Do you know? There's some shuyukh who would say that, for example, when a child is born, one of the reasons as to why they cry is because in that moment, like shaitan is pricking them. And what is happening is that they're responding in tears in that moment. And some of what is being removed now from the Prophet is this kind of element that is now put away, thrown away by the angels. And he's now in this space where he has to make sense of it as a child. He's like telling these people this is what he's gone through. Do you know? You want to link it from the standpoint of socialization because he's in a state of disarray. When he gets his first revelation, Iqra, read, on the cave of Hira, and the angel's in its true form, the prophet also is in a state where he thinks he's lost his mind. He doesn't know what it is that he's just gone through. They're like very real experiences. Do you know? It's not something that has details that are limited in a way that makes it seem very kind of idealistic or romanticized. So he as a child now is in this state where he has to kind of express himself, but he's still getting through it. Do you know what I mean? And what we see is that his capacity as a person to endure is just very different from other individuals' capacities to endure certain things. Doesn't mean that he doesn't feel like very real human emotions, but his recovery time and the ability to avoid a state of paralysis as a result of things that are just bewildering and shocking, those things don't necessarily come up. He's got like a different sense of self that is rooted in a strength that we don't want to juxtapose to weakness, in the sense that if somebody is in a difficult situation and they become very vulnerable, then we say that they're weak. But you can say that he's strong without saying that someone who would act otherwise would be weak. Does that make sense? And so here now he's telling these people that they opened up my abdomen and they're in this place where they don't know what to do. Anas ibn Malik, who's being told this, he says the Prophet lifted his shirt, shows him where the scar is, that the incisions came in. Why might this be something at least twice in the Prophet's life? Why is it something that is a part that is identified in the Seerah but is taking place in this way? If you can turn to the people next to you, because we want to kind of engage this from the standpoint of also its relevancy to, like, what are things that you can take away from to not see it just as a story from the many stories of the Seerah, but why is it that is so important that it happens twice, that it has to have some kind of meaning back to us? Do you know what I mean? I can tell you that the meaning that it is that we're supposed to take from it practice that says, you know, all I got to do to get rid of like my terrible inclinations is just cut open my heart and throw away this black spot that was somehow in there. That's not what it is. Do you know? But thinking about what are some of the things we can draw away from it. Like, why is it something that takes place in these ways, and how do we make sense of it for ourselves in terms of lessons that we derive? If you can turn to the person next to you and just kind of talk it out for a bit, what are some of the things that we can take away from this incident? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Yeah, go for it. Good luck. Yeah, I'll say inshallah. Alaikum.
And another thing that was still awesome. Just like we all are. That's all I came out of there. The second is so he was in he did say so like basically the same thing. It wasn't as so when he was a kid, like watch the kids and they run to the parents if you're grown men that have to be treated. So it happened first and it happened first. He also mentioned so next time it happens, I think the narration but it's also, I don't know if it's yeah, that was the it's interesting no, after we got graduation, I got 230 signs. Wait,
Program, so about what it was like when the second application was considered.
The exact age?
No, around like what?
It was at Isra and Miraj, which was, I'll tell you right now. Isra and Miraj was 621, so he was 51 years old. Yeah, 51. Yeah. Okay. So what are some of the things that are coming up? Like, what can we take from this incident for ourselves? Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know why it happened twice, but my interpretation or what I learned from it happening once was that every single human has that within them, and Holy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of removing that from you. So it's almost kind of a praise of his power and what he's capable of, and it's also an indication of like his mercy and what he was able to take away from it. So again, I have no idea why he did twice.
Okay. Other thoughts? Like, how is it relevant to us? Yeah.
I see. I mean, many points, especially now these days, many points in our lives where we need to cleanse our hearts, right? This goes for all of us, humanity in general. You know, for example, what's going on in Palestine, which I, seen in the news, and whether if the individual is really Palestinian, but just to acknowledge that these things are going on, right? And lives are being lost, right? Children, innocent people, they're not even prepared for this as in military state. If the individual sees it's okay to hurt an elderly, senior, or even a child, they need some cleansing in their hearts, right? It goes from a level where, I may, let's say that I do have a child, and I may get upset at my child, I may raise my voice. I need more cleansing in my heart, right? And it goes to an extreme level where acknowledging that you did something wrong, right? Or what's being done in Palestine, hurting others, and a lot of lives being lost. This is something that needs cleansing. So if the individual does not take action and work towards cleansing themselves, then somebody has to put them in a better environment. I guess this is why we have jail cells, right? They try to improve the individual, right? Identifying, put them in a better environment, or it just it's we all need cleansing in our lives.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of a insight on like both physical and spiritual cleansing. We can talk about in a little bit more. Other thoughts that come up? Yeah.
You were talking about how in Islam we're given multiple opportunities for this. We were talking about big moments in our life, whether it's kind of rebuilding a relationship with Islam, or when a convert takes their shahada. It's this kind of big moments where you want to be cleansed, but we're also talking about the smaller things, like the whole part of the story where the heart is put into water.
Yeah, amazing, right? And again, you see water in an important part of the Seerah, right? Water at the founding of Mecca. Water is no longer in Mecca. Water is founded again in Mecca. Water is here in this instance, and the elements that are given to us for our physical and spiritual purification, the performance of wudu, the doing of your salah, like understanding these not as burdensome tasks, but as mechanisms that serve a purpose in the performance of purification, but also the absence of it serves as a mechanism for whatever it is that needs to be cleansed to just be deepened and increased. Do you know what I mean? Other thoughts? Yeah.
I think this builds upon everything that you guys said, but we basically said that there were two forms of corruption. So there was the one that we were innately born with, which was the first washing, as humans all of us have. And then the second washing was significant in the way that the dunya kind of corrupts us as well. So it was to sort of purify what everyone's been saying, the environmental impact of just being here. Another thing that someone brought up, I think, Sada did, was that once you were going to go meet the Most High, like the Prophet says, someone was going to meet all the prophets and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there was an element of that wudu type ritual of purification before you.
Amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
Though we were kind of talking about how, I mean, this kind of ties into what everyone else said, but the fact that people were able to see that it happened, the first time it was children, but the second time, the fact that people were able to see just shows that, like, we as humans, like, we're fallible and we have that all within us. And, like, one thing that we kind of talked about was how, like, the Prophet himself had that in him. So, like, who are we to say that, like, we are, like, perfect and we're not? Like, we don't have the, ability to say so. And my thoughts are kind of jumbled up, but that's kind of what we thought.
Yeah, I mean, when the capacity is given in an Adamic narrative that Shaitan is told you can engage all of creation, right? The prophets are still a part of creation. They have those elements at a very human level. And when the angel removes this, one of the things that he indicates is like this is essentially Shaitan's portion, meaning the element that he would have control over the prophet of God. Inclination in and of itself now you want to think about, right? This is a 4-year-old having this experience. A 4-year-old going through this at the level of some of the things that we could discuss, because the hadith says when they see the prophet, they come upon him. They're not calling him the prophet. He's not a prophet at that time, and none of them are Muslim because there's not Islam at that time. But like they say that he is very pale, right? His color has changed. He's impacted by this. But if you're thinking now from the standpoint of what it is that is rendering impact on a child's heart, even at a young age, you start to be in a place where you are influenced by what's around you. Your socialization is creating an impact. You are starting to build up within yourself a core belief structure that can either be positive or negative, right? You're in this space where think about what you've gone through. What has he already gone through in his life? His father has already died. His mother gave birth to him after an entire war takes place in Mecca with an army. Things being in our heart are also not just because we're like the worst human beings, but you can hold pain, you can hold trauma, you can hold all kinds of feelings and experiences. Do you see what I mean? And so you are a product of your childhood also. The prophet is impacted. When he goes back to his mother, he starts asking her, where is my father? And he's not asking these questions put yourself into the head of a child who sees everybody else with a dad, but he does not have a dad. Just by principles of logic, what might that feel like for somebody? And where is there a need to be able to see? The prophet is getting ready for a lot of different things, to receive revelation, to be in a place where he takes on the heaviness that is prophethood, and to receive wahi, to receive Quran. you and I then have to think out, okay, if our prophet is having this happen to him, what is that regularity through which I'm engaging in these processes so that I am not heavily burdened by heaviness inwardly that then defines my perspective of just meaning and purpose? Even where you are in the world right now, there is, we said 2 weeks ago when we talked about Abraha coming in to like Mecca and all of these other circumstances that arise, there's no empire that existed forever. Nothing is in a place where it is always in like authority. Things go up and things go down. This is the nature of like how things just exist historically. I can't tell you why, but that's what's there. The idea that there's an afterlife that is putting a trust in the divine that says that all of these things are going to be balanced and restored. These people who are able to commit these acts are not in a place that we can say are indicative of what a heart that is solid on its foundation would be calling people upon. And then allowing for myself to be in a place where I start to think, well, what am I carrying within me? What do I have inside of me in terms of pain, in terms of imagery I've consumed, in terms of people who have yelled and cursed and screamed at me? What do I have inside of me in terms of memories and experiences? What do I also have where I'm overtly honest with myself that I'm having difficulty forgiving myself for or forgiving others for? That I know everything that I've done up until this point, none of us are angels. But not all of us are also willing to acknowledge some of what it is that we carry within ourselves comes through us not living the way that humans are supposed to live. We took like 80 people to a farm on Monday where we were shown how, like from a actual Islamic standpoint, slaughtering takes place. And pretty much everybody, as we were talking about it, they said that of the things that stuck out was just the simplicity of all of it. It wasn't meant to be like this kind of burdensome process, and the respect for food. And forget about the meat. This farm had vegetables that were being grown that tasted amazing. I've never seen this many brown Muslim people sitting at a place that also has meat, and they're just chomping on carrots, eating radishes. Literally, I was at a point where I was embarrassed because people were taking plastic bags and they just raided this man's farmhouse with all kinds of things. And the way children go trick-or-treating on Halloween and come back with a bag of candy, you had all these Muslim people walking on this bus holding bags full of vegetables and God knows what that was, you know. And I'm like, man, you just stole all of this farmer's food and you don't even feel embarrassed, you know. And they were just nice people. They were like, just take whatever you want. Just take whatever you want. But what gets in the way? Other things that we can draw from this, your physical heart is linked to your spiritual heart. In our spiritual system, there's a paradox that a hard heart is a weak heart and a soft heart is a strong heart. And so if the physical and the metaphysical have a link, don't eat garbage food that's going to make your heart hard. Don't be in a place where you don't have understanding of how your physiological self inwardly functions. And to recognize that here they're removing something from a physical heart, but understanding that the placement of your spiritual heart is intrinsically linked to the state of your physical heart. So also don't purposely do things that you know are going to put pain into your heart. Don't build relationships with people that you know mistreat you. Don't put yourself in the company of people who, when you're around them, you do things that are hurting yourself. Understand that there's a link between how all of you is connected to the rest of you. So it's not that your spiritual self is outside of you, it exists within you. And here there's a relationship that's clearly being outlined between the physical and the metaphysical. Does that make sense? And so on tangible levels, if I was to ask you concretely, at this juncture in your life, Some of you are not Muslim in the room. Some of you are Muslim for like 5 minutes, right? Some of you have been Muslim your whole life. If we were to ask you in the course of your week, your month, what do you do with firm intentionality that is just about the cleanliness of your inside? And in your day, your week, your month, how much of your routine is spent just making it filthy? And thinking about it in those terms. Not based off of a moral relativism, not jumping to put your back against the wall to defend things that nobody's even fighting with you about. But this is the most precious part of yourself. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is described as having the best of hearts. In Allah nadhara fi qulub al-ibad, the hadith says that indeed Allah looked into the hearts of His ibad, the hearts of His righteous servants. فَوَجَدَ خَيْرَ قُلُوبِ الْعِبَادِ قَلْبَ مُحَمَّدٍ صلى الله عليه وسلم, and he found that the best of hearts was the heart of Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم. فَاسْتَفَاحُ لِنَفْسِهِ, he chooses him for himself. That's why he's called Al-Mustafa, the chosen one. And he endows him with the responsibility of being the prophet. But he's not looking at his race or his culture or his class or his wealth or any of these things. He's just looking at who has a good heart, who's got a heart that's strong enough to hold Quran and the burden of revelation, who's got a heart that despite that burdensomeness loses a father, loses a mother, loses a grandfather all by the age of 8. Has no other siblings, is an only child going through this mess. Leaves from his nurse mother that he lived with from the time of his infancy till he was 4 years old. We've had kids that have stayed in our home for just days. And we are excited that they go back to their actual families. But they're in tears after they've just spent time with us for weeks. Some of you, when you leave from this place, you have just remorse inside your heart. Kids graduate, they're crying. People leave, right? You got some people, I'm not going to mention who, but like Luna, who leaves and comes back and leaves and comes back and leaves and comes back. And every time she leaves, she's like in a place where you can see, and some of her friends like force her to cry. But that's what happens when your heart gets attached and you love people, right? And we cry when she leaves, but she cries when she leaves. The Prophet, by this age in his life, has also left many people who are still alive behind, right? So you have to think all of this stuff that's coming inside of you is not going to be healed by something that is outside of you. There has to be maturation in your understanding of how you function on a whole. If you willfully choose haram, then you are choosing haram. You don't want to have it in a simplistic understanding, but a recognition that says that it has implications. If you give up on the fara'id, then you're giving up on the fara'id. And those obligatory things that you might struggle with is different than just willfully walking away from it. They're two different things. If you surround yourself in spaces constantly where you are the only person of your background, and then you don't purposely make time to frequent spaces where you can just be and you don't explain yourself, how are you telling me that your heart is important to you? How will your schedule, your routine, your calendar, if we were to just open it and I would say, show me on a regular basis what you are doing for the betterment of your inside? What could you point to with regularity? If the answer is nothing, then you got to take this conversation and allow for it to be a reframing of how you make sense of what you're doing with your time. There is going to be heaviness in the world. May Allah make us people who are not broken down by it. But then these things catch up. It creates now challenges that if prior to were already holding on to strings. And how can I think about this in a different frame? You got to be a source of healing inwardly for people, not a source that they have more damage inside. I've said it in other gatherings, but what makes it really hard for people to love people fully is that we don't like ourselves so much. And that becomes a product also of what we're carrying inside of ourselves. And so twice over, God helps to lighten the heart of his most beloved, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah gives you easier experience than something as traumatic as going through someone opening your chest and physically engaged in this. All you gotta do is read your Quran. All you gotta do is contemplate and reflect. All you gotta do is pray those prayers. All you gotta do is engage in acts of kindness and generosity. You're built in such a way that when you do good for somebody else, you actually gain contentment. That's how you're built. When you live in a society that says me, 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 it can become inundating, but it's purposeful to have you chase complacency rather than contentment. So in this portion of the Seerah, you want to think out for yourself, where does this type of cleansing come from? It doesn't have to be in parameters that are rooted in, I'm the most terrible thing that exists in the world. No, man, you are good. You want to see terrible people? Turn on the news right now. You want to see people who are devoid of ethics and values? Shaitan getting into your head the idea that you struggle to wake up for Fajr is somehow equated to this atrocity that we see? Don't give him victory over you. But let yourself be in a place where you can understand that there's no spiritual growth if there's nothing to improve upon. And if you're holding all of this stuff inside of you but not doing anything to find ways to cleanse yourself of it, to purify yourself of it, meaning to heal yourself from it, then it's just going to keep creating hurt, and hurt's going to be the prism through which you see this world. That heart that is a little bit more solidified in its healing, it's going to always understand that Allah has everything in control. It's going to always understand that there is a bigger world in store beyond this one. Not indifference that renders passivity, but a foundation that says, let these people have this world. We will live for something bigger than it. And so here, in the Seerah literature, your prophet has purified his heart. What do you do with that intentionality? You can bow up and down like a rooster, the way the hadith says, and you can pray with your body, or you can pray with your heart. Recognizing the relationship between the physical and the metaphysical, the postures and mechanics are divinely ordained, and they are ancient practices that are time-tested. So if you don't do it the way it's intended, then it's not going to give to you what it's intended to do. Do you get what I'm saying? So think about this over the course of this week to next week. Think about it in its relevancy to the world today. It doesn't mean that if you are feeling down, that's weakness. If you are feeling down, that means your heart is alive. How could you not feel sad at a moment like this? How could you not feel heaviness? If you are in a place where you are indifferent towards it, then that's something that's indicative of something also. To move forward out of respect for our brothers and sisters who are being just vilified as they're being terrorized. Understanding for yourself, then put more light into the world. And if I can't do it for me, which is a good enough reason, loving yourself enough to say my inside is important to me, then do it for somebody else who's carrying heaviness right now. I'm going to be the best version of me so that somebody who else needs someone to lean on, I'm strong enough to hold them up and not fall down with them as the world is burdening them upon their shoulders. As the Prophet is now in this place, his foster parents have no idea what just happened. They think that something has maliciously attacked him. And so Halima Sa'diya, she is in this place where her and her husband say, we got to give him back to his mother. They don't have an intention to tell her what happened. They're in a place where they have discussions on this. Single mom, husband just died, all kinds of things going on. Mecca has a plague. That's why she gave them back, right? There's like difficulty. People don't live just in the moment you see them. Everybody's got crap going on in their lives. So they say, let's just not tell her what happened. We don't want to add more to what's going on. So they bring her back, and the Prophet's mother is not an idiot. She says that you wanted him so badly that you brought him to me and took him back again. Why are you giving him back to me now? And then they say, this is what transpired. And she says, do you think that there is some malicious entity, a shaitani entity, that is looking to hurt my son? She said, know this. Nothing like that is going to be able to do anything to him. That when this child was with me in my pregnancy, it was the easiest pregnancy that any woman could ever happen. She talks just about the ease that he brings into his life, the recognition of all of the barakah that's there. It's not something that has to be understood in that way. And so the Prophet now is back with his mother Amina. They're about 5 years of age or so. He starts like engaging in these conversations. Where's my dad? She takes him to where Medina is, and that's where his father passes, so that he can see the grave of his father. And then as they're returning back to Mecca, like, she also passes away. Who's with them at this time is Ayman Barakah. So Barakah, as we said last week, is the one now who is with the Prophet at this moment. I don't know, like, how many of you, I know some of you, but I couldn't say every single one of you I know how you have experienced this kind of loss in your life. But think about this again, right? What's a very human connecting point through the Seerah is the emotional experiences of the Messenger of God. A 5-year-old having to understand that his father has passed and standing in front of the grave, hard enough as an experience. And they're not getting in a car and driving 3-4 hours from Mecca to Medina. This is a journey that's taking place. And in the course of this, his mother also passes away. The person who's there for him at this difficult time is this Abyssinian black woman, Barakah. This is who Allah chooses to be with his beloved messenger at a time when he's in deep need. Do you get what I'm saying? In understanding the connecting points here, not overlooking these details. How must he be synthesizing this information? What must it be that he is experiencing at this time? And he doesn't live in like the outskirts of the city. He's not part of a tribe that nobody knows. His grandfather is Abdul Muttalib, the man who found Zamzam, who is the chieftains of all of these people. So don't you think everybody also knows what is happening to this boy? How sometimes when you know somebody has passed away in someone else's life, there's discomfort, you don't know what to say to them, maybe I won't check in or this and that, or you lose something in your life and you just don't want to talk to anybody about it. You don't want to have to answer people, are you okay? I'm so sorry, this and that, again and again and again. What is he going through as a child? And his experience around it. And your own ability to connect at a tangible emotional level, on a human level, because he is not deified. Our Prophet is a man, and he's a boy in this situation, and he's going through this circumstance. he stays with his grandfather for 2 years. And then his grandfather passes away. And now he's with his uncle, Abu Talib, for the next 40 years of his life. We're going to take a pause here in terms of what we're discussing. Next time, we're going to talk about where the Prophet goes in terms of the next phases of his adolescence, his adulthood, the importance that his job as a shepherd plays in his life, and why that's something that's very key and important. What I want you to do, just for a few minutes, turn to the person next to you. What are some of the things you're taking away from tonight's conversation? What is it bringing up for you? Then we'll come back and discuss, and then we'll wrap up and pray Isha, inshallah. But go ahead.
Oh, there's another hadith that actually says, be nice to your brothers coming from Egypt or Turkey, because we are from them. Yeah, so it's mentioned in that book, I forget, but I remember I read it, it said beyond. And the reason why it's called that is Bilal, the person who gave everyone knows the story of Bilal, but it stops there. Exactly. That's why it's called Bilal. But as for I think just like, you know, like we all have like laws, especially if like a prophet died, you have to and Christ is twice in life. Like us as people, we also have
Okay, what are some of the things we're taking away from tonight? Who wants to start? Yeah, go ahead.
Be intentional about cleansing your heart. Each have your weakness, so whatever it is to help you do that, just be more intentional about it.
Yeah. The two questions I ask people the most that I get the answer of I don't know to is a generalization. And anything that you could think somebody has gone through has like walked through my office. And I don't like making generalizations because people are very much specific to who they are, their strengths and non-strengths. But these two questions across the board, I get I don't know. One, I say to people like, what are your values? What like really guides your decision making? And when they're very honest, they don't know. Because most of what they do is just about making money, like this and that, right? It's not love compels me, truth compels me, compassion compels me, Islam really compels me, right? And then the second, that's relevant to this question of values and what guides your kind of decision making is how do you take care of your heart? And when they're really vulnerable and honest, they say, I don't know. If I asked you these questions, what would you say? And we can work on this together, right? Because you're a specific person. What helps me in my wellness is not going to necessarily help you. But not doing anything is not going to necessarily be a recipe for kind of feeling energized, right? It's going to just feel debilitating all of the time. Do you know what I mean? What else are we taking away? Yeah.
You know, there's three things. I think my mind is still stuck on what happened this weekend. I'm happy that you guys were discussing it. I personally, in my heart, I really appreciate that because there's a lot of mosque and Muslim settings that I grew up in that when tough things happen, they just kind of ignore it or they don't really bring it up and they have an easy answer. Like in Urdu, they say, well, yeah, Allah ki qudrati, which means like this was Allah's will. And sometimes that's true, but we need more spaces to talk. So I honestly appreciate that I came in here and everybody was sharing about what happened this weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
I work, as you know, with the little kids of New York City. And I have a kid, his mother, he's a little kid. He's like in second grade. His mom died last year. Nobody told him that his mom died. They said she went to the hospital and she never came back. And this year, he found out because his dad told him. His dad is Muslim. And all he does when he works with me is he says, my mom is dead. My mom is dead. For 30 minutes, he says this. I see him twice a week. And I just empathize with him so much. And he's just a little kid. It's a huge loss to lose a mother. Because that's like your blood, your kun is from your mom. So it's like I empathize with our messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he went through this. Like he lost not only his mom, but his dad. So when you were talking about this, I kept thinking about that kid who I work with. And he's one of many in New York City whose moms die of drugs, or they die of, maybe they have to leave, and there's so many stories, but this is just something that, I was thinking of, in terms of I'm so grateful that Allah lent me a mother, and I had her my whole life. It is a real privilege that for my entire childhood, adolescence, while I practiced Islam, ignored Islam, she was always there, right? That comfort of seeing her. And I just empathize with this student, inshallah. Everybody prays for him, that he finds some peace, and inshallah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, yeah, that's just what I was thinking of tonight when we were talking about the Rasul.
Yeah, and you think about this in a lot of different vantage points, but also from the point that is being said here. The Prophet is also a product of the people who raised him. So when you get the benefit of having a young person in your life, if you choose to have children and Allah blesses you with children, or there's other people around you who are young, they're going to be a product of what it is that you raised them to be. So this is who raised him in these ways. What would be the recipe under like my guidance as to what my children might end up being, right? And we have the advantage of seeing what the end result is like years later, that he goes through what he goes through, but he has this supportive environment that helps him to process. If you don't have these things, I apologize. I don't know. I fundamentally don't know the answers to a lot of things when people ask why. I don't know. I don't know why there are people who are caretakers that do not honor the rights of the ones that they're supposed to take care of in ways that they're supposed to. I don't know why dads mistreat their kids. I don't know why moms mistreat their kids. Don't mistreat young people in your life, right? And be in a place too where if you have to, as difficult as it is, that you address generational traumas, things that you're holding inside of yourself, so that it's not being passed on to other people, that something stops in a certain place. So the Prophet is a product of these people who raise him. Do you know? People will be the products of how we raise them to be. Do you know what I mean? What are other takeaways that we're taking from this conversation? Any other thoughts? Yeah, do you have your hand raised? No? It's okay. You want to say something?
I mean, well, okay, fine. We were talking just about how, like, the experiences that the Prophet had in his life were not easy, and I feel like sometimes it's, we were talking about, like, a little bit, like, relatability of when you're getting, like, you know, these messages of, like, how to live life. Sometimes it's easier to take it from someone that has gone through hard things as opposed to, like, an, you know, idealized person that, like, has been perfect 100% in their life.
Thank you for that. No, I was just thinking that like it's really special to see someone go through so many hard things and that it makes their heart softer, not harder. And I don't know, that's a lesson I want to take, that hard things don't have to make our hearts harder, they can make them softer.
MashaAllah. Other takeaways? Anybody? Things you want to bring up? Yeah.
No, I changed my mind. Sorry. I didn't want to ramble my thoughts again.
That was the brother behind you, as Randers.
If you can't cease to react, your level of guidance will not be accepted. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you don't have there's a difference between understanding and understood. When you have a level of understood, your guidance is already protected. So, as you're speaking about pure heart, it's a myth, because if you don't understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set forth in the Quran, there's a lot of chapters in the Quran that Allah states with the meaning behind everything that's going on in humanity. It's called within disconnect. Alright? Numbers, when it comes to numbers, there's a number that stood out of all the numbers that configurates the reasoning of why people act the way they do, and why they do what they do, and why they behave the way they do, and why they think the way they do, and why they cannot control what they say. And that's number 8. If you look at Facebook and Instagram, number 8 is flatlined, like it's laying flat. It's not straight up. Why do they put that up there? It's a sign that you don't need to know the meaning behind it. But they created that sign. That's why they call it the matter. Right? So the government and the world will not testify and give you that meaning behind it, because nobody understands that. The only thing that understands that is the voice that gets out that creates the input. How everything came about is a voice. Without the voice, none of that stuff would be created. So you can never have a pure heart when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ مِنْ شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ. That's a default. You have to customize yourself to cease to feel. To cease to feel. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said repeatedly. It's an internal input. You can't make the blind see, nor you can make the deaf hear. I could say everything that I want to say to you tonight. You put it on one ear, and you're gonna get out the other. You don't have guidance. You don't have the entitude that protects you. Can you open these two fingers apart? If you're not connected to Allah, and you're not devoted to Allah, Allah will not give you that door. So I'm going to tell you this now. This is my second time being here. Mentioning before and mentioning again. I have a heavy burden on me. I'm a Muslim brother. I slept outside for 10 days in a row. I haven't took a shower in 5 days in a row. And a lot of people know about it. Last time I was over here, I got mentioned when I was over here. The reason why I'm not getting supported is because what's called reputation. And the person was on the microphone when he said that. Now that I came back again the second time, who has the will to submit, to support, that I can make dua for? Because it's a circulation of fear that's being created, but everyone's talking about it, but no one is the heart to support. Everything that you came out your mouth pertained to me, but I understood that. And I revealed myself. That's why the sister said, identify myself as the echo pertains to me. Now that I displayed myself to you guys, I need your help. I'm a very spiritual person. You help me today, I will help you later.
So happy to help where we can. I'm sorry to hear about the difficulties you've had. And after we're done praying Isha.
It's not a difficult. There's a difference between difficult and allowed.
When the first time you came here, but after we pray Isha, we can sit and talk and we can figure out a plan, inshallah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Other thoughts before we wrap up? Okay, so you want to say something? Go ahead.
That's why they created Pokemon. Carry on.
Something that came up as you were talking and also bringing up the stuff about the farm, I found this framework where you said that we need to take care of our hearts because we have to be the best version. I have to be the best version of me. So when someone needs to lean on me, they find me strong and solid. I found that notion very, very beautiful because I was thinking as you were talking that I would never be as hard on other people's hearts as I am on my own heart. And I would never want someone to like take on their hearts the burden and the judgment that I put on my own. And I also know that like Allah would never put that on my heart either, right? So when thinking about taking care of our hearts in an intentional way and not just, filling your calendar with other stuff, especially stuff that, makes it filthy, like you said. I'm thinking also in terms of like, how can I frame this in terms of my religious obligations as well? Like, how can I be respectful toward my own heart and my own body as far as like Allah's creation, right? And if he's being so kind of loving to me that he gave me his life and his body and his heart, like why am I mistreating them? Like both my body because I eat trash, like you mentioned, and my heart because I am unkind trying my best to not, kind of like other parts of his creation outside of myself. So I appreciate that framing.
Okay. Why don't we end with Luna's last reflections? Not her last reflections here. She's gonna leave again, but she'll probably be back in a month or so after she's gone. We will meet next Wednesday, inshallah. But just with the nature of things going on, certain things are kind of day by day. God forbid there's a reason for us as to why we'd have to prioritize something else, then that's just something we'd have to do. But we can assume that unless stated otherwise, we'll be meeting next Wednesday. And the other programs that we have typically are going to continue as well. Tomorrow, Imam Zakir Ahmed is going to be doing a program here with Faith NYC that is for, it's like a halakha for a professionals community. They'll start at 6, I believe, or no, after Maghrib time, and go for a couple of hours. And we'll let people know about other things that are taking place. On Saturday, we're going to have our monthly convert brunch. If you'd like more details on that, just let me know as well before you leave from here. And I believe next week, we have the Latino Muslim meetup next week. Is it that, or is it 2? Yeah, so next week on the 19th, we're going to do, on Thursday night, an event that's for our Black identifying community. That'll just be like a meetup also, as we're starting to build out different elements to that program that we have, our Black Muslim Initiative. So in addition to the lecture series and other things, for those of you who do identify as Black, African American, African immigrant, please make a note of that to join us and let other people know as well. It's going to be open to people from, the entire community. So we'd love to see people there, inshallah. What is it? Oh, tomorrow is the Sacred Door lecture series that Sheikh Fayaz Jaffer runs also. So you can check that out as well, inshallah. Okay, so let's take a pause here. Somebody wants to call the adhan. And then once the adhan's called, we'll call the iqama after 5 minutes. So people want to pray their sunnahs, make wudu, and then we'll make isha, inshallah. If you could just put your chairs against the wall, I'd appreciate it. We'll see everyone next week. Assalamu alaikum.
To ask about the event happening on Sunday. You didn't mention that. Is that
Let's see.
it's somebody sent it to me. An event that
This is on the 22nd.
oh, the 22nd. Oh,
So it'll be next week.
next